All right, we're back again with a little bit more evolution. So again, evolution is just the study of how organisms change over time. And we're going to be talking about what homologous means. Again, you could follow along with your guided notes. Your guided notes are going to be on a separate link for your assignments because the guided notes package should entail this week and next week. Also, you're going to need this to do the homologous structured lab that is due today if you're following along on virtual school. So our aim today is to understand there is evidence for evolution. So if you remember yesterday's video, where the video, does evolution have two dads? We talked about how it was a theory. However, there is a lot of evidence to prove that this theory is true. So since we can't go back in time, we can look at evidence that is out there. So let's look. Let's see what it is. So this is known as homologous structures. So all these are in Spanish, by the way. But if you look at all these appendages, whether it is a whale flipper, or Rena is an alligator leg, or a horse's leg, a lion's leg, a human arm, bat wing, or bird wing, all the bones in these structures are the same. And that's what the lab is going to be looking at today. So you're not going to go to your lab yet, but these are analogous structures, right? So if you remember what an analogy is in English, that was Luke upstairs, by the way. And so if you look at the moth wing does the same thing as the bat wing and the bird wing. However, it did not evolve the same way. So it has the same task, but it did not evolve from the same structure. So what is some of the evidence for evolution? Well, analogous structures, right? We could look at the bones and just say, hey, we have the same exact bones. Our appendages might do something different, like a bird wing and a human arm, etc. But they're all the same bones. So if they have the same bones, we might have the same common ancestor. Then we can look at molecular evidence. Well, molecular evidence is a fancy way of saying your DNA and your protein in your body, right? And then we can see how our DNA is similar. So we actually have something in AP where we put our DNA into a computer base, and they trait, or not ours, they actually look at DNA from that was discovered in a dinosaur, Archaeopteryx, and then they see what has evolved from that based on the proteins and DNA and stuff. We share I would say 98% of our DNA with the chimpanzee. And I have a separate lecture where I talk about this, which is kind of interesting. Even though we share the same DNA, we don't share the same amount of base pairs, which is really interesting. But I also have a piece that's called the most incredible number in the world. So, and that number is 99.4. So you and your most distant relative on the planet, the person who you are the least related to in this world, share 99.4% of your DNA. The only difference between you and that faraway distant relative, wherever that distant relative is 0.6% of your DNA. Your individuality is just 4.6% of your DNA. It's amazing how just a little tweak in your DNA can kind of make you so different. Look at my boys, like Luke and Matt, right? I mean, they look a lot alike, kind of. I don't think they look as much alike as people tell me they do. But their personalities are just so totally different. Just a little tweak in DNA, a little base here or base there change, and two totally different people. Here's just an example of just a little tweak between a sea lion and an elephant seal, right? Both very similar, but two different species. Another thing that we could look at is embryology, which is the study of embryos. So we look to see how embryos, how pigs and humans and stuff are similar in certain ways and dissimilar in other ways. The picture that I show here was written in the 1800s. It's kind of been debunked. I'm not going to get into it on this video. We are kind of vastly different in an embryological stage, but we kind of still use this example so you kind of understand the simplicity of the concept that embryos are similar, right? We could look at fossils as well, and we could see how fossils have changed over time. That was another thing Darwin looked at on his journey. He looked at the fossil record, and he just thought it was interesting how he would see something on the tip of South America, and it was also on the western coast of Africa, similar species of fossils. So we'll talk about that later. Here's just certain ways that fossils can be made. I'm just going to zip through this. Right. So if two organisms are closely related in their evolution, in their DNA, in their proteins, so we say they have biological similarities, they have a common ancestor. So we talked about DNA. This is one way that we could look at DNA. Kind of interesting. You might have got a taste of it a little bit with the New York State Biodiversity Lab that we did online. And we could look at the mammoth and we could look at the elephant, see how they're similar and how they're different. Some people say that we could, because we find mammoths all the time frozen, but their DNA has corrupted because they're hundreds of thousands of years old. So some people say we can actually replace some of their missing DNA with elephant DNA and then create a mammoth. It's kind of like how Jurassic Park, the movie, got started. And again, we said we're 98% similar to chimpanzees. So also we could look at residual structures, okay, like our appendix, our pinky toes, our wisdom teeth. Some of you out there might be able to move your ears up and down, okay? That's kind of residual structure, like your dog can move its ears. So we used to be able to move our ears, but we have better eyesight. In a bigger brain, we kind of eliminated certain things. We used to have hair all over our body. So that's how what residual structures are. That's why we need our wisdom teeth pulled out. Tail bones, right? We used to have a tail. That's the appendix right there. We don't have it anymore. As embryos, we used to have gill slits. Well, why do we need gill slits? Because we don't actually swim or breathe the fluid that we have when we're in the womb, right? We're attached to an umbilical cord. And we have baby tails when we have little tails when we're babies or embryos. Here are some of the similarities between us and other creatures. I'll get into that on another video. All right, now I'll get into this pairing, which is really kind of interesting as well. And then finally, there's a fossil record we could look at. There's two ways of looking at the fossil record. We call this relative dating, right? And it's determined by where they show up. Like if they're on the top, we think they're younger than if they're on the bottom. This can get debunked very easily by my students in California because there's earthquakes in California. So they would know that the ground gets moved, so it's not very accurate, right? So that's known as relative dating. And then there's absolute dating, which is radioactive dating, which is half-lives. So certain things, once they die, they have a thing called carbon-14, and it has a half-life. It only exists in whole for a period of time, and then it's reduced in half. So I think like uranium, it's 235 billion years. So we believe that we have half the uranium that we started with when the world got started. So the world is double that number, almost 500 billion years old. So we could look at something that's dead and look at its radioactive material. One of the ways that I have you remember which one is more accurate is it's not good to date your relative, right? So absolute dating is the better of the two. All right, so let's check for understanding. How do scientists know that two species are closely related? Well, we have structural evidence, we have molecular evidence, we have embryology, we have fossils. Now, you can go start your lab. I hope that was helpful.